I want to invite my Asia Pacific panel to join us. We flipped things a little bit on the schedule, so we're going to open up with the Asia Pacific e-commerce strategies. We're going to have June, Isabel, and Nicole join me, and we're going to get going here. So I think back to, as I mentioned earlier today, when we were last here, we had an APAC showcase, and interestingly enough, we were over in Theater 2. June was there, so I'm glad to welcome her back. One thing we've been trying to do with the program is kind of do some bookending where we have one presenter or one topic that we talked about in 2020, and we come back to that. So June, thank you again for joining us up on stage and talking about Asia Pacific e-commerce strategies. Isabel is new to Guelph, at least to the stage. She's been behind the scenes helping us for years, and obviously she's been working with June, and I'll let her introduce herself as well. And Nicole is also new to Guelph, so thank you so much for joining us. We really appreciate it. And so what I thought we'd do is just kind of open up and have you guys introduce yourself. Why don't we start with you, June, and then we'll go to Isabel, and then we'll wrap up with you, Nicole. Nicole's going to share some slides with us, a little bit about the state of e-commerce in Asia. As you saw earlier today with Rob's presentation, certainly China's always got that big, huge bar at the top, but there was a lot of other fast-growing areas that we may not talk as much about. Mostly we'll talk about kind of the big three, China, Japan, and South Korea today. But if there are any questions, or if anybody would like to dive into what's going on in the Philippines, which I think was one of the fastest-growing areas, Southeast Asia, we see Malaysia, we see Vietnam. We see a lot of opportunity there. So with that, June, why don't you kick things off? Tell us a little bit about your background. I know you've just made a couple of big changes in life, so you can fill us in on those as well.
Sure. Hi, my name's June Van Heel, and I am head of international at Bala. I formerly worked at Manduka, and I was the general manager of Asia Pacific there. And yes, it was June pay back then. So during the last Guelph session, I attended. I just joined the team at Bala, and the goal, for me, is to help the brand expand globally, as it's a relatively young brand. And so, I'm happy to be here and discuss our Asia business.
And where are you guys selling in Asia right now with Bala?
We're not actually.
Okay, yeah. All right. There we go.
Just in Australia, yeah.
So Isabel, talk a little bit about, you've been working with June, so give us a little introduction and let's go from there.
Sure. My name is Isabel Gam, and I did work with June for the last 3 years when she was in Manduka. And my company, I founded a company to launch and also grow and protect US brands in China. So we focus on expanding the market for US brands into China, which is perhaps one of the most challenging markets in the world. And gladly, I had a chance to work with June on Manduka, and after 18 months, Manduka is now the second biggest international yoga brand in China right now. After Lululemon, but we are kind of far apart. So before I founded the company, I was working at Mattel. I was leading the China development for them, and before that I was in Cummins doing international acquisitions and joint ventures, which usually are the big companies want to use when they expand into new markets.
Got it. Nicole, thank you for joining us. Nicole's going to give us a little bit of an overview. Tell us a little bit about Sitcon. Obviously, you guys have been in the market for a long time, and we always value kind of the data insights and any other kind of insights you guys can share. So welcome.
Thank you, and thank you for having me. Appreciate it.
Got it.
Yes, so my name is Nicole Granucci. I am the head of product marketing at Sitcon. Also part of the great reshuffling, which is a word I did not see earlier.
Reshuffling, no, I've gotten like 6 of them during the break here.
Yes, so I have been, I'm just about to hit my 90 days at Sitcon.
Congratulations.
I'm pretty excited about that, but I'm thrilled to be here. What Sitcon does is we are a global payments platform, and we facilitate a way to have more payments, easy integration with one single reconciliation. And so that is our optimal tagline, but what that means is that we allow merchants to facilitate payments for their customers the way that their customers want to pay. So if you think about the digital landscape, mobile wallets everywhere except for America have been growing a great deal. And so what Sitcon does is we allow those merchants to open up those mobile wallets so that anywhere in the world a customer can pay with the way that they want through their mobile wallet on any channel. And for the merchant side of it, it's all integrated with one single transaction, one single integration. So we make it much easier to facilitate those payments.
Got it. So let's talk a little bit about the growth that we're seeing. You know, we saw some slides earlier from Rob that was highlighting, you know, kind of the world in general. Talk to us a little bit about the data that you guys have here.
Sure. Well, this is one of my favorite topics. We talk about APAC leading e-commerce growth, and it is. I mean, we're talking about a $2.5 trillion opportunity in e-commerce growth in APAC today. And you can see the numbers that we have on the slide, which is pretty remarkable, but 65% of the world's e-commerce is coming from this region. And so as we take a look at the growth, it's growing faster than North America. And as you look at incremental sales alone, just across APAC, we're talking about $870 billion within the next 5 years. So if you're not thinking about going into APAC, or if you're there but you're just scratching the surface, there is money for the taking. So it's a really, really important thing to pay attention to and figure out how to go, and we can help you do that.
So June, when you talk to the folks at the new office or the new Zoom or however we're doing that, obviously, you know, you were brought on to lead them into Asia and things like that. What's the storyline? What are the data points? What are the fears or concerns that they have?
Yeah, I think for a lot of US brands, especially smaller ones, Asia is a bit of a daunting task, especially because the logistic challenges and et cetera. And so I think first and foremost is just reassuring that it's not as daunting and difficult as it may seem, especially if you partner with the right people. And so, you know, one of the first things I've done is to introduce Bala to contacts that I've worked with and partners that I've worked with overseas, and allowing them to give our team an introduction and overview of the regions that they're in. So for example, like Isabel is an expert in China, so you know, she is better able to educate on her region than I am. And so we aggregate that data, and based on what we see and based on where we see the most opportunity for growth, that's where we're starting to tackle how to enter and when to enter.
So is it, you know, China, Japan, South Korea, is there like a cadence, or is it different for every brand? Because, you know, we've done a couple of sessions actually before the pandemic on Southeast Asia, and it was always a little challenging because the numbers were looking really good, but it was still early for a lot of people throughout Southeast Asia.
Yeah, so I think it really depends on the brand and what your current demand is like. Bala's look and feel, for example, resonates very well in the UK and in, well, we presume in Japan and in China and Korea as well. And so depending on where you believe your target demographic would be, you know, based on your marketing or product, that's how we would tackle. We are certain that based on my experience and, you know, from Manduka and what we're seeing in the fitness industry, that definitely the big three, China, Korea, Japan, are really important APAC markets for us. But we're also tackling Canada and Europe as well at the same time. And as I've mentioned, we're already in Australia. So. Got
it. And Isabel, maybe reflecting back on, even back to your Mattel days, similar for a big company, or is it more driven by brand studies, distribution networks, things like that?
For companies like Mattel, with $1 billion on the balance sheet and to drive the growth initiatives, usually they would use acquisitions, joint ventures, or strategic partnerships with the biggest companies like Alibaba or JD or NetEase in China to grow the market there. Because the initiative I was leading in terms of development was grow $150 million in China to $1 billion in China within 18 months at that time, 18 months to 3 years, that kind of time frame. So definitely different for companies that are at a smaller scale. And that's actually exactly why I thought that there is a lot of demand for companies, smaller brands that do not have the balance sheet or the partnerships that companies like Mattel or Cummins has, and I can help them to grow into China.
Got it. And Nicole, I forgot to give you that.
Thank you.
So why don't we go to the next slide?
Yeah. Literally double clicking in. So we talked about e-commerce growth. Let's talk a little bit about cross-border. This is a particular pain point that we recognize with many of our customers. And as you think about cross-border e-commerce and the growth of it, it's something that's important to address. So today, we have about 50 billion in cross-border e-commerce growth, and within 5 years, it's going to go to 100 billion. And there's a few reasons why. When you look across APAC, particularly the three countries we just talked about, China, Japan, and South Korea, first and foremost, the population is exploding there. It's expanding, and it's really this segment of the population that's becoming much more affluent. They also have a desire, these consumers, for more Western-style products, and we heard that loud and clear in the first session, which I thought was really, really compelling, talking about Patagonia and Speedo. And so particularly those resonated because they're brands that I buy. But particularly there, those Western-style products are popular. And so as you look across the region, there's this perception that the North America brands are so sought after and desired, and they're such good quality, that people want to buy them. And so recognizing the ability to do that and facilitate the payments so that you can get those cross-border transactions done is critical to the growth of your company.
And we'll just go to the next one.
All right, so now we've talked about this, but it's not easy. And so we have what we like to call a little bit of a perfect storm that's been happening with these barriers that many merchants recognize. And feel free, ladies, to jump in here with some examples that you may have seen. But first and foremost, when people go to pay, especially in the e-commerce environment, and they're ready to pay with their payment of choice, and it doesn't pop up at the shopping cart, this triggers a very high volume of cart abandonment. There's a lack of a recognized brand, and there's a little bit of a trust issue there, and also just like, oh, forget it, I'll buy it through someone else because of whatever reason. So that's the first piece. Compounded to that is the low approval rate. So when we take a look of what's happening with that overseas credit card validation, as soon as it goes over the pond, we are ripe with fraud, right? So we have all these actors that are trying to get into all of that data and steal that information. So the approval rates start to go down because it triggers this fraud alert. And then on top of that, there's a high chargeback rate. So if you take a look at this international payment fraud I just talked about, chargebacks are rampant. So all three of these things are creating this barrier or barriers in the market for people to actually purchase the goods that they want from our merchants. And then on top of that, there's this language barrier piece, and this is more indicative of merchants themselves being able to serve up that shopping experience in the language of choice, and to really show that the customer is at the center of the organization. And so I might actually open that up to Isabel and to June to say, you know, have you recognized some of these barriers, and what has been some of your
and feel free
there?
to other challenges. I know we talked about logistics in the morning as well. You know, I don't know if the high cart rate abandonment, if there's some, you know, kind of secrets or things to watch out for. And feel free to, you know, talk about China, Japan, South Korea.
Do you want to go?
So I think the challenges are a bit different in each region. China, for example, has a lot of legal implications, and so even when we were getting started, back when I was at Manduka with Isabel, you know, trademark was a huge issue that we hadn't foreseen, and also delayed us from entry. So I would, you know, encourage any brands that are looking to go into China to kind of be on alert and be on the lookout for that from the very beginning days, because the earlier you can act on it, the more chance you will have of being successful. I think that Japan has a slight different challenge in that the audience or the customer rather, they are very much looking for quality, and they are very expectant of regionalized marketing. And so I think it's really crucial to have a partner who can help, or a local office even, who can really translate your content to fit the market. Korea, I would say, is, based on my experience, one of the most open in terms of really loving US brands and fashion. And however, there are different challenges there as well. I think one big one that I've seen is that transshipping is pretty rampant in Korea right now. The government doesn't quite regulate if parallel importing. So if someone else is importing your brand, so that's definitely been a big challenge that I've seen. Yeah, those are the main barriers that I've faced.
Yeah.
And Isabel, if you want to dive into China, go for it.
There was a question about how the social media translates to China. And the one biggest difference between China and Japan, Korea, or any other countries is China is an isolated island. Not like the content on Instagram or Facebook or of your social media channels are not like communicated to China. So everybody, basically, they couldn't access Instagram. They cracked down the VPN all the time. So basically, if any brands want to go to China, you are looking at building it from zero ground up. Of course, there will be some basis for understanding and knowing about the brand because people, they still find ways to get to the social media in the Western, in the other countries. But just assume that you are going there and building it from just like you are building the brands from ground up in US. So that's the challenge of the Chinese market. I think the biggest challenge of how to not localize your brand, but also culturalize your brand and attract a group of consumers that are just like, probably not just like the consumers in the States, but a consumers that will also love and appreciate your brand there. So I think that's the second challenge is finding that consumer that will love your brands there.
Right. So we talked a little bit about any other takeaways from this and maybe along the digital wallets and super apps and things like that you're seeing? Because I think in some cases, we get that cooker cutter mentality and we forget that there are some important payment differences.
Yes, one of the biggest aha moments that I've had in my tender time at Sitcon has been thinking about the digital wallet space and the fact that we always talk about alternative payment methods, right? As soon as you get out of the US bubble, credit cards are the alternative payment methods. It's just a whole different flip. And so you're out there across APAC, everyone's using their phone to transact. They've been doing it for years. Now, there is growth in the US. We've been seeing it. I've been seeing it everywhere I've been going as well. And I think the pandemic was the tipping point to really push people over that edge. But this is really important because if you look across APAC, specifically in these three countries, digital wallets do outnumber credit cards. And that's the reason why.
Got it.
Yeah.
We talked, actually, WeChat was just kind of getting out there when we were together 2020. Can you give us a little bit of maybe the before and after of WeChat and how you guys are using it now? Any recommendations for folks?
Yeah, I think Isabel may be better to speak to that because we did actually create a storefront when I was at Manduka with Rose Planet. So
yeah, the super app, as you mentioned. So in China, the direct-to-consumer kind of website really doesn't have much of traffic. So when we build a direct-to-consumer store, it's built on WeChat, and there has a lot of tools to use for affiliate program, for the tools that you have for on Shopify. So that's besides the payment of the WeChat, we are also using it as a storefront as well for direct-consumer.
Got it. And I think we had one more. Okay, so a little bit more on that. I think we've covered the Asia Pacific piece. We didn't get a chance. We were originally going to do a LATAM APAC mashup on this one because we are seeing a lot of similarities. And are you guys moving into LATAM as well. Where does that kind of, rank in your priority, June?
Yeah, we are, but I think it's more on a partnership level, and also depending on region, if there is demand that warrants us to, not necessarily entering like all countries at once, but one thing we are working on is obviously with the expansion of Amazon, we are looking at opening 3P stores globally, including Mexico, which is one of our biggest markets in Latin America. But kind of going back to the point earlier, I think in addition to payment methods, something that resonates globally is that each country has its own unique marketplace and platform that it's operating in addition to Amazon. And so I think that's where things get a little tricky because, for example, like China, Isabel mentioned having different apps, but in Japan, there's Rakuten, which is just as big as Amazon. Korea, there's Coupang and Naver. And so I think understanding the importance of those marketplaces and realizing that it's not just your website and it's not just Amazon that's going to drive businesses for you there from an e-com sense, I think that's very important.
And we've just got a couple minutes left, but Isabel, we talked a little bit about this move to kind of specialty channels throughout Latin America, APAC, but especially in China. Obviously, the last time we were here, we had a large presence from the Tmall Global folks, and certainly we're continuing to see that kind of blending of a D2C experience into the marketplace. But tell us a little bit about what you guys are seeing in the specialty channels. And Nicole, I'm curious if there's different payment opportunities there as well.
Sure. So for brands going to China, of course, Tmall and JD are still the biggest platforms there. So but new specialty channels are, we saw that Goat was here, but there is a company that is similar to Goat services, but they also expand into e-commerce. It's called Poison. And then Chinese name is Dewu. They also specialize in like sneakers and also trendy products, streetwear, and beauty as well for people that are younger, like Gen Zs, or that's why I don't buy on that platform. And these are like a really good, I would think will be good launch platform for brands that fit into those categories, like targeting lower aged audience. So Bala could be a good launch brand. That could be a launch platform for Bala, for example. And then, of course, there is from the tier 1 cities to go into tier 2, tier 3, to tier 5 cities, especially for brands that have like lower or mass appeal. Then there is, of course, PDD, and the penetration is super high. My parents buy everything from PDD because they live in a small county, small town in Hunan, and then they don't buy from JD or Tmall, they buy from PDD. So there are multiple specialty channels for different demographic on different kind of brands.
And Nicole, are you seeing the kind of afterpay model, the pay now, pay later, or buy now, pay later? That's even better, pay later, pay later. Never pay.
Exactly. Yes, we are seeing that. And I love what you just said about segmentation because it's so important. So as you think about where these different generations are shopping, it's also the way they prefer to pay. So buy now, pay later is massive. It's growing exponentially. We're working with a pretty big partner right now, Klarna, who I'm sure you've all seen. And they're actually doing their global expansion plans as well, so we will be growing with them, which is pretty exciting. But if you want to go after millennials, and particularly, I guess they're called Zoomers now, which I think is pretty cool. If you're going after Gen Z or Zoomers, this is really an area they love because it's the old-fashioned layaway when I was working in retail, except now it's within your wallet and you get the goods up front, so it's what's not to love.
Right.
So that's a big one. And then there's other forms of payment that perhaps more Gen X want to use. At PayPal, Venmo, of course, there. And then as we look across to the other markets, it really just depends, especially when you talk about like the NaverPay super app. I mean, people really like to aggregate those forms of payments depending on how old they are and where they're shopping.
Got it. So again, the conversation starts here. It moves out into the foyer. Any questions before, and I'm going to ask my next speakers to come on down. Any other questions from the audience? June's going to come back at the end of the day. We're kind of debuting a new showcase where we're focusing on direct-to-consumer brands and what's it take to take them global. No geo boundaries on that one. So I look forward to having you back. Thanks again, June. Isabel, Nicole, thank you guys so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right.